Welcome to episode 2 of the Music Revered podcast. I'm your host, Zach Hamilton. My guest for this episode is Jeff Russo. Jeff is a founding member, lead guitarist, and co-songwriter of the two-time Grammy-nominated, multi-platinum selling rock band Tonic. If you missed part 1 of my talk with Jeff on the Film Revere podcast, be sure to check out episode 26, where Jeff talks about how he transitioned from rock star to in-demand film and TV composer. And with that, let's move on to the second half of my talk with Jeff. Well, welcome to the Music Revere podcast, Jeff.
Thanks for having me.
So on the show today, we're going to be discussing your early career in the music industry, as well as your work with the rock band Tonic. But before we get to your band, I'd love to take a step back and get an idea of who you were when you were younger. First off, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in New York City.
Okay. And were there any members of your family that were musical?
Yeah, I had an uncle who played piano. I had an aunt who sang some. But generally speaking, no. My dad loved to listen to music. And my mom, I don't know. No, not at all. I remember her singing to me and me begging her to not sing to me. She couldn't really carry a tune. But that's not in a bad way. I mean, she wanted to sing to me because what mother or father doesn't want to sing to their kid? But,
Yeah.
I would say no, there's no real musical in that part of my family. No.
Well, I'm curious. You said that your dad liked to listen to music. I'm sure you listened to the same records at that point. What was your dad into? What kind of music was he listening to more often than not?
He was listening mainly to classical music.
Okay.
A lot of Beethoven, a lot of Brahms, a lot of Bach. That was what I remember hearing when I was a kid. But then my dad went out and bought me my first album, which was the Beatles' Yesterday and Today.
Oh, wow. Definitely a change up from his taste.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, my dad was an old school European, and his whole thing was all classical music. I don't remember him listening to anything popular. I think it was all, he listened to basically to just classical music. One of the things I loved most when I was a kid was my dad had a vinyl set, a big box of Beethoven's 9 symphonies.
Wow.
And they were all invited. Yeah, it was so. I just remembered that when I was like 5 years old. I remember my dad sitting in the living room listening to Beethoven's 9th and Beethoven's 3rd. But yeah, that's my sort of history in listening to music at the house.
Yeah. So I guess my next question would be, what age did you begin playing guitar?
Well, it's interesting. I didn't start playing guitar until I was like 16. I had started.
Okay.
When I was in the 4th grade, they said, you pick an instrument. So I picked violin, and then I hated it. And then 5th grade, they said, pick another instrument. And I picked clarinet, and I hated it. In 6th grade, they said, pick another instrument. And I picked drums. So I played snare drum in the orchestra. And I really got into drums. So then I started playing drums, and then I got a drum kit about a year later, and I started playing drums until I was in a cover band in high school and realized that the guitar player had a lot more fun. And I decided that I needed to be a guitar player, so I just borrowed his guitar and taught myself how to play guitar, probably around 15 or 16.
Wow. Well, and I mean, that's pretty awesome of your parents to allow you to have a drum kit. I know that some parents, they go back and forth and that it's like, I want to be encouraging, but it's a drum kit. It's going to be loud.
I think they had to make deals with the next door neighbors. They had to make deals with the next door neighbors on when I was allowed to play drums during the day when I got home from school.
I bet. And you had mentioned you were in a cover band. Do you remember what band you guys were covering, or was it just like a myriad of music?
I remember very well. We were a Cars cover band. And,
oh my gosh.
Yes. And it's funny because just recently I met Elliot Easton for the first time as a guitar player from the Cars, and I told him that. He was quite impressed. I mean, he was impressed, and I was starstruck.
Oh yeah.
And, that was kind of funny. So yes, it was all Cars.
So did you have any preference to guitars, or did you develop a preference for a certain brand of guitars later on, or are you more interested in all?
Not really. I sort of loved playing the classic types of guitars, but the very first guitar I ever had was a Stratocaster, and I hated it.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't like it. I wasn't a Strat fan. So the next guitar I got was a Tele, which I really liked. But in the end, I started playing Les Pauls, and Les Paul just sort of became my guitar of choice.
Okay. So moving on to your work with Tonic, I'd love to know, first off, how did the band meet?
Well, Emerson and I had known each other since high school. We were both we would both hang out in Central Park on the weekends, and we met through friends. Eventually, I think I may have dated his ex-girlfriend, and we met that way. It was some sort of very weird, incestuous way of becoming friends. And then we met again. I moved out to California, and I hadn't seen him in a couple of years, and I met him again out here. I walked into a pool hall where he was he was working, and I was hanging out, and he was like, "Hey, what's up?" And I said, "Hey, what's up?" And it was just one of those hadn't seen each other in a long time feelings, And then he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I don't know. I was in a band, and I left that band, and I was sort of looking for another band to start." And he said he was doing the same thing. So then we just started playing music together.
Something I find very interesting in interviewing people for this show is that with a lot of the bands, there's always some really interesting beginning names that the band started off with. I'd love to know, were there any odd or funny, or just, what were the other band names floating around aside from Tonic, or was it always Tonic?
The first name we had was Radio Flyer. And we really loved that name, and it was really, really great. It was a really great descriptor of our band. And when we got signed and we tried to use it, the wagon company said we could not use the name, so we had to come up with another name, and then Tonic was what we came up with.
It's always interesting how that happens. You never really think when you set off to make a rock band that you're going to be in a competition with a wagon manufacturer for your band name, I'd imagine.
Yeah. No, we never really thought, we didn't think that through, but we were all very young, and we didn't really know what we were doing.
So on July 15th, 1996, Tonic released its debut album, Lemon Parade, which would go on to reach platinum status, and one of the singles off the album, If You Could Only See, was also named the most played song of 1997 by rock radio. What was the process of making this particular album with the band?
Your first album, you have your entire life to write your first album, right? So
yeah,
we got with a producer, Jack Joseph Puig, and just started rehearsing. We had been playing around LA for about a year and a half before we had got signed. The process, I think, was just like any other process. Like the producer got us in a rehearsal studio. We started playing, and we started picking the songs for the record as we were getting through it, and went into a studio and just started playing. It was a grind, but we all loved it. I mean, we were all 20. I think I was 25 when I started making that record, and I remember drinking so much iced tea that I started getting dizzy in the shakes because we weren't, none of us were sleeping, and we were all smoking a lot of pot and drinking a lot of whiskey, and just being young and having fun making our first bona fide piece of art, and that's how it felt. That was really how it felt. It was really a pretty incredible experience in terms of being a part and really in the moment of a creative process.
Oh yeah, it couldn't have been any better as far as a debut album. As we touched on, it went platinum. What was going through your mind when you found out the Lemon Parade actually had gone platinum?
Leading up to that experience, you never really think about it, right? You don't really think, oh, you go platinum. You're just sort of like living in the moment. Like we were on tour, and we got a call from our record company and said, we're bringing you back to LA to present you with certification for a platinum album. And we were like, what the fuck? So none of us really understood the gravity of it. I'd known what a gold record was and what a platinum record was, and I knew that meant like, a lot of people are buying our album and love the music and we're getting into it. But I don't know, it didn't really change much for us, except I think we got a bigger bus. We might have gotten a bigger tour bus. We tried not to look sideways when we were making our records and on tour. We didn't really want to stay too in touch with that. We just wanted to sort of live in the moment.
Well, and I love that too, because in a way it kind of, you were so focused on the current, being present, and that you didn't even realize what was going on back home with the whole like record sales. And I think some bands, it's very easy for them to get off track and focus on record sales and then end up, that could either be a good thing or a bad thing, I guess, depending on how you want to look at that.
Yeah, we tried not to go down that route.
When exactly did the band begin performing live?
Oh, I mean, right early on, we started playing together, Emerson and I started playing together right away. We just started, I think maybe a week after we started writing some songs together. I was working at the Improv here in LA as a sous chef and a line cook. And I asked them if we could play our acoustic guitars out in the dining room with a little microphone. And they said yes, and we did. And we played a couple of acoustic shows like that. And any chance we had to get in front of people to play our songs, we did, and we took the advantage of that. So basically right away.
Wow, that's insane. And then I guess, what was going, I'm just curious how different that was for you, the experience once you started performing for incredibly large audiences as obviously Tonic's popularity rose.
I mean, it's a totally different experience going from playing to when we first started on tour, when our record first came out, I remember we played to Tom and Jackie. That was their names, Tom and Jackie, at a bar in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I think the bar was called Batman Bar or something like that in Cincinnati. And
okay.
I remember it very well. It was like there were two people, and we played to those two people, and they had a good time. And then the next time we came back to Cincinnati, I think we played to 2,000 people. And
oh my gosh,
that was a big change. And certainly as we started growing and playing in front of more and more people, it just changes the scope of things. It doesn't really change who you are. It doesn't change what you do. It just changes the scope and the size and the scale.
Having toured for so long, I'd love to know what's been one of the craziest shows for Tonic. Has there been a certain performance or maybe a tour that stands out among the rest?
Well, I remember in 1997 we played at Music Midtown, which is a festival in Atlanta, which was one of our better markets. And there was 30 or 40,000 people, and we were headlining, and it was pretty incredible. That was one moment that I'll never forget for the rest of my life. But in 2010, I think it was, we headlined a festival in Poland where I think there was 400,000 people. And that was it was just unbelievable.
400,000.
I think it was 390,000 people or some unbelievable amount of people.
Oh my gosh.
So ridiculous. We couldn't believe it when they told us how many people were there. So moments like that are pretty just very surreal, very surreal.
I'd imagine when you can't even see where the crowd begins or ends, that's got to be pretty wild.
That actually happens after about 10,000 people. Once you're in a place with 10,000 people or more, you really can't tell the difference between 10,000 and 100,000. It's just,
wow.
From the stage, you can't tell the difference. You can from a helicopter, but not from the stage.
So over the years, what's been your favorite song to perform?
I don't have a favorite.
Really?
No, I don't. It's different every time. It's sometimes it's Mountain, sometimes it's Lemon Parade, sometimes it's If You Can Only See, sometimes it's a cover song, and we have so much fun playing cover songs sometimes.
Yeah.
I would say I don't have a favorite, and it wouldn't be fair to pick a favorite because then the next day it wouldn't apply.
In 2016, Tonic released a 20th anniversary edition of Lemon Parade featuring all the original tracks in acoustic form. Now, the fan reaction to this album was immense, and that being said, I'd love it if you could tell the listeners a bit about how this album came to be, as it was certainly unique compared to previous Tonic albums, being that it was crowdfunded.
Well, it wasn't. It's not such an interesting story, I would say. Me and Emerson and Dan we just called each other and we were like, what are we going to do for our 20th anniversary? It's been 20 years since the first record came out. What do you want to do? And, we thought, well, let's definitely do a show here in LA at a place where we got our start, which was Molly Malone's, this bar on Fairfax. And then I suggested that we get together and do me and Emerson and Dan in a room with some acoustic guitars and play and see if we can put that on a record and give that kind of stripped down version of the songs a chance for our fans to hear it that way, like the way these songs were originally conceived, which is, we conceived of all those songs sitting around with acoustic guitars and just, playing songs and singing. That was sort of the beginning of the band. So we thought it would be a good idea to do it that way. And then we decided, we're like, okay, so how are we going to pay for it? And we did a crowdsourced funding effort, and people were really into the idea. So that was how that came about. It's not like a terribly exciting story, but it was really heartfelt. Like we really did believe in that record, and that record made us feel like it was the record, like the little engine that could. It just kept going and kept going. And I think people really do. Gravitate towards good songwriting and good songs with melodies that are memorable and lyrics that have real true meaning to the writer, that are not just songs about nothing. And I'm not saying that those songs don't have a place in this world. They do, but the songs of we like to tell stories that we are attached to or connected with. And I think that's why those songs connected with people.
So lastly, is there any upcoming projects of yours that you'd like to share with the listeners?
I'm working on a movie that's coming out this summer right now. I'm doing the music for this movie called Mile 22, which stars Mark Wahlberg, and is directed by Pete Berg. And that's a fun one. It's a fun, high-energy, action-packed drama.
Oh, yeah.
That's a lot of fun. I'm working on. I just finished Legion, which just finished airing, and I'm going to start working on another movie in the late summer. So that will be something that I'm very interested in people hearing. That'll be fun. And then I get started back on season 2 of Star Trek Discovery. So hopefully somewhere in there I can fit in a couple of Tonic shows. I was just talking to Emerson today about it, who's actually on tour right now with another guitar player who's sitting in for me in this summer tour because I'm a little busy. I can't really make the shows. But I was saying I'm hoping that in the late summer and early fall I'll be able to play some shows with the band.
Definitely. And again, for the listeners that are listening to this podcast, if you didn't catch Film Revered, which aired earlier this week, you can actually hear all about how Jeff Russo transitioned from, being in Tonic to becoming a composer, and hear more about his work as a composer. So definitely look out for that. And you can listen to that now. Seriously, thanks again for joining me on the show, Jeff.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Well, that's the end of episode 2 of the Music Revere podcast. Please show your support for the Music Revere podcast by leaving a review on iTunes, Google Play Music, or wherever you happen to listen to the show. Be sure to follow the company's social media accounts on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Revered Network to get all updates first. Another great way to show your support is by following the Music Revered playlist on Spotify. Plus, it allows listeners like you to hear the music discussed by guests on the show. My guest for next week will be lead singer and songwriter for the Verve Pipe, Brian Vander Ark. Lastly, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Music Revere podcast. Have a great weekend.